I want to introduce my guest tonight before I run you through the highlights of what this podcast has in it that has triggered this angry reaction from Pakistan. John Spencer, who's a world-renowned war expert and also a scholar who is researching Operation Sindoor directly. Sushant Sareen, author, scholar, avid Pakistan watcher and commentator. Air Marshal R.G.K. Kapoor is former Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Central Air Command. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with me. A request to all of you to try and keep your answers as brief as possible so I can get as many reactions as possible on everything that I'm going to show you from this podcast. The first highlight that appears to have triggered a big meltdown is about women fighter pilots participating in those airstrikes. Here's what Air Marshal Nagesh Kapoor, recently retired Vice Chief of the Air Staff, said on our podcast.
There were women pilots also who were involved, right, in an operational role. Fighter pilots I'm talking about.
Yes, they would have been, yes. We never discriminated between the fact that they were girl pilots or boy pilots. They went through the same bit of training that everyone goes through. Once they were commissioned, thereafter they went through the same grind in the squadrons that anyone would go through without any bias towards there being women or nothing of the kind. In case the corrective actions were to be taken, then they must have been taken when the CEOs and the flight commanders would pull them up by the ears to make sure that they fell in line. And so they were just another fighter air crew as far as we were concerned.
Vishnu Shom, my co-anchor and co-host on the Control All Defense podcast, is with me live for a quick word on this. Vishnu, this one official word from the Air Force that women pilots were part of the airstrikes, they flew strike missions during Operation Sindoor, has created a shockwave in Indian media and across the border.
Well, it has, wouldn't it? I mean, some of the details which the former Vice Chief, when he retired as Vice Chief just a few weeks back, are fairly startling. For starters, we now know that Bholari, and you saw an image of Bholari very briefly over there, was struck by a fighter jet, at least one of a Sukhoi 30, something that he also mentioned, operating from one of the air bases under the Southwestern Air Command. Secondly, women fighter pilots were a part of Operation Sindoor. The Indian Air Force went about it quietly. They didn't make a big, show and dance or a song and dance out of it. And this is something which just shows that barrier, call it what you want, that glass ceiling has been shattered once and for all. And the entire argument of, what happens if a woman pilot is shot down, forget about it. They've been to combat. They went to combat first in Kargil on helicopters. They've been into combat on fighter jets right now. So let's forget about that. It's not about gender. It's about capability. And that's what these women have been able to do. But the attack on Malir Cant, and this was a question which you asked the Air Marshal, how India actually went about doing that. Details about how the Southwestern Air Command targeted the radars in Arif Bala, Pasrur, Chunia and elsewhere. Those were shaping operations that led up to the major strikes. These were all very major details which came out in that podcast. More details, I would hope, keep coming out a year after Op Sindoor.
Definitely will, because, we've got many more episodes of the podcast to do with those who are part of Operation Sindoor. Vishnu, thanks very much for being with me on that story that has created all these shockwaves. Now I want to play a second small chunk from the podcast, and then I'll bring my guests back in on this. How the Southwestern Air Command, which is headquartered in Gandhinagar, Gujarat, was responsible for the many BrahMos airstrikes on key targets, including something that became the face of those airstrikes during Operation Sindoor, the Bholari Air Base in Pakistan. Take a look at what he said.
And so describe that Bholari mission, sir.
What do you want me to describe there? I mean, there were aircraft that, the weapons that were used, the aircraft were to get airborne and...
BrahMos.
Yeah. So
I just wanted to say it out loud once.
Yeah. So the BrahMos was used. Absolutely right.
So this is a fascinating, series of nuggets of detail. Many of these things we already knew, Air Marshal Kapoor. But here, for those who are avid war watchers, and I'm sure John will also be enthused, and so will Sushant, that now we know that some of those strikes came from the Southwestern Command's area of operations. And here we have a confirmation that Bholari, which became a kind of face of the entire airstrike series, was conducted from the Southwestern Air Command.
So if we see, first point I want to make is that I think nationally we have come out of the closet. If you see from Uri to Balakot, how we expressed ourselves,
Yeah.
I think there is much more clarity, there is much more confidence, and there's much more faith in the leadership at the political level, with the leadership within the Air Force, to come out and clearly say. When we spoke about narrative war, this is the narrative that sets the record straight. The second point is Bolari. If you see, Bolari is right opposite Southwestern Air Command, and so the best aeroplanes would be from there.
Yeah.
The kind of distances that we see across the border, from the border to Bolari, is the only weapon. Two weapons that could have been used were either BrahMos or Scalp.
Yeah.
And so with Su-30s being there, BrahMos becomes the obvious choice.
Absolutely.
The confidence in BrahMos rose primarily because we had very, very good strikes in the north and the west. That is, whether it was Noor Khan, whether it was Sargodha, which paved the way for the building up of confidence in the Air Force that yes, this weapon is very accurate.
Yes.
And we can use it to the extremes of its ranges. This confidence was further built up with the kind of interceptions that were taking place by S-400.
Yeah.
So if you see over 2-3 days, the confidence in everything increased. And this confidence, now whether Pakistan had a narrative or whatever it is, the fact is that the pain was inflicted on Pakistan. And that was visible in the satellite image.
No, that's very true. Sushant, this demonstrates also a confidence in releasing, information. A few years ago, I might have thought, oh, this is very operationally sensitive. But the Air Force seems pretty confident in putting out these pieces of information that have come out for the first time in this podcast. For instance, where the BrahMos actually flew from to hit Bolari.
Yeah, Shiv, aside of that, I must still add that I think we should have come out with this information far earlier than what
I agree.
The narrative wars are not just about setting the record straight, as the Air Marshal is saying, which is correct. You need to set the record straight. But you need to set the record straight in record time, right? Otherwise, the other guy has already said what he had to say, and he has done all sorts of drum beating, and their field marshal has become Trump's favorite field marshal. All of that has happened. So, one, you've been late off the mark.
Yeah.
Second, again, look, I think it was on the night of the 7th and 8th that Malir was hit, because we had a press conference the next day, and I think it was when the DGMOs were giving that press conference, they mentioned in passing Malir Cant. And at that point of time, my eyebrows went up. I said, but Malir is Karachi. So on the night of the 7th and 8th, when, Indian television had gone a little berserk, and there was that Karachi has been hit and Lahore has been hit, Karachi had actually been hit.
Yes.
What are we waiting for? What was it that the people who were in charge of the narrative warfare, the information warfare, why were they sitting on this? For example, if on that night or the next morning you had declared that we have hit Karachi, Malir, because nobody in India knows Malir, right?
Correct.
So if you had said that we've hit Karachi cantonment in Malir, there would have been a lot of pressure on the Pakistanis at that point of time. Hell, the Indians have come and hit you in your commercial capital.
Correct.
What is this, obtuseness in terms of information warfare?
And you're right, Sushant, because the information about Malir came out in that press conference only on the 10th. In fact, I have one small chunk that I want to play out for you on precisely that. Finish your point.
On the female pilots, again, I agree with the point which was being made that, look, pilots are pilots.
Yeah.
Don't by their gender, they're warriors, they're air warriors. Great. But look, from the psychological impact, that entire bloody fake machismo of these Punjabi Muslims, you break it in one go that there was a female pilot who came and kicked your butt. The point is that they were claiming that they had shot down a female pilot and captured a female pilot. So they knew that female pilots were involved in going and bombing them, right? Why were we being shari about it? Why are we now talking about it?
Completely
Why not?
agree.
The psychological impact on that entire fake machismo of the Pakistanis is shot down by this one fact alone.
Correct. I completely agree. And in fact, I was in Uri when this information came out, and I was the one who actually posted on social media saying, I've spoken to this pilot in question and that she is absolutely fine. There's no question of her having been shot down anywhere. John, before I come to you, I want to play out this small nugget on what Sushant was talking about the intense deliberations that occurred before the Air Force decided to target the Malir cantonment, which is the first military target being struck inside a big city, that is Karachi. Take a look at what Air Marshal Kapoor said.
We were debating actually all the time, and whether to go for this or not to go for this, because like you said, it is right in the heart of a city.
Yeah.
And even when we took on those other radars at various air bases, when they were deployed inside an air base, we made sure that they were to a side where there were no domestic population, no domestic areas. So essentially that no civilians who had nothing to do with this war would get hurt. So there was this huge dilemma in the mind whether to go for this or not to go for this. Eventually we did. It was a very, very calculated decision.
John, very interesting, detail from the planning stages about whether or not to go ahead and strike a target inside Karachi. What did you think of that?
One, I want to thank you and Vishnu for the interview. You're helping me as I'm writing my book about Operation Sindoor with this first-person information from the Akash surface-to-air missile shooting down 2 Chinese UAVs to confirmation on Bolari and the use of the BrahMos. I really appreciate that. On this last bit of information, actually in my research, it's showing whether it's you're taking 34 targets and narrowing them down to 9. And what are the criteria? Is that civilian harm mitigation and deterrence impact plus a non-escalatory kind of metric is always being thought through across the tri-services. Actually, when I was in Udhampur with the Northern Command Commander, when he retaliated to Pakistan artillery shelling Indian villages, he directly targeted the guns. It's like that escalation control is in every thought of every leader that's made during these 4 historic days.
Very, very true. And this next little segment that I'm playing for you gentlemen has actually triggered a huge conversation because it's a lot of fun. It's sensitive, but it also gives you a sense of the human aspect of real-time planning when a war is actually on. This is Air Marshal Nagesh Kapoor, who retired as Vice Chief just a couple of weeks ago, talking about the delayed confirmation of the airborne timeline to prevent an abort order from the Air Force leadership, where he says he, quote-unquote, lied to the Air Force Chief. Very fun segment. Just listen to this.
So there's this time that I had to kind of lie to my chief for this mission. I had to kind of not tell him the truth. I wouldn't say that I lied to him. I didn't tell him the truth. And this was knowing fully well that he was he was seeing the same picture that I was seeing in my ops room. He was seeing the same picture sitting at this time AHOC, Air Headquarters Ops room, right? So he was seeing the same picture over there, and he asked me. He said, "Caps, position of those aircraft." I said, "Sir, getting airborne now." I knew for a fact that they're not going to get airborne for the next 15 minutes. So I lied to him in as far as time was concerned. So where are they now? So I said, "Sir, half an hour from weapon launch." I knew they were not there. I knew that I had to let them go. Those pilots had been waiting with those weapons suspended for such a long time. It would have been criminal for me not to let them go. So finally, when the weapon launched, and I told him, I said, "Sir, all gone, all aircraft returning." He said, "Tell me when they land." So these people landed, and much later thereafter, the Honorable Raksha Mantri visited us, and we were sitting and having lunch together, and the chief was on the same table also. And that is when, in front of the Honorable Raksha Mantri, I told him, I said, "Sir, I lied to you." He said, "Mujhe pata hai."
Marshal Kapoor, we were wondering whether we should keep that in the podcast, when it happened. But then it's such a fascinating human nugget in terms of planning. He said, I lied to my chief about the timeline so that an abort did not happen. Make sense of this for us. This is amazing.
See, you make your plans, you make your operational plans. As the campaign goes through, you have your targets which you want to take out, and you're going by that plan, and you don't want anybody to interfere there.
Yeah.
And when you have the confidence that there is clarity of purpose, there is clarity of direction, and that you have a free hand, then you know that the offensive purpose that you are in can be exercised. The fun part is that there was no context to timeline and which wave was going and what was the date. And so when we put that into context, I think he would have thought, I'm just guessing, I'm sure he would have thought that, with whatever, because it's such a clear picture in ISCCS.
Yeah.
It's crystal clear, who's taking off, where each aeroplane is, where each weapon is going. Everything is very clear.
Amazing.
And so even though he told the chief that there are 15 minutes, chief also knew at the same time. So you know that how it is playing out.
Yeah.
And the fact is that the objective that you have set out for becomes very, very important so far as you're not compromising the higher direction. So I think this was a very, very judicious decision that Nagesh took between the offensive action that would have actually been the final nail in the coffin. To not doing it where you would have been, you might not have been talking about Bolari or Djokovic.
Yeah. Next segment, which I want to get John's view on, is on Air Marshal Kapoor talking to us about the US intelligence on the 9th of May, crucial, just a day before the ceasefire, warning that Pakistan planned to escalate using long-range and short-range ballistic missiles. Listen into this. It's the first time that this has been said.
The information had come to us from the United States,
Yeah.
saying that and telling our leadership that from all the information that they had, Pakistan was going to up the ante, and so you could expect a massive strike. Now that strike, what could have caused it? I mean, what weapons would they have used for that kind of a strike? We were very sure that they were not flying their fighters. Because they did not fly their fighters. They hadn't flown their fighters for the past 3 or 4 days at all. Is nothing that we saw in the southwestern area of operations. They did not fly their fighters at all. So yes, it could have been. It would have been a very well educated guess to say that maybe ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
Maybe, yes.
John, with Pakistan's Air Force pretty much paralyzed, air defense paralyzed, ballistic missiles were coming next, said this US intelligence input. Have you been able to get into that in your research as well?
Absolutely. And I think the documentary mentions it as well. So we'll have a few more than one primary source. But you're right. That's the first time very clearly said in an interview. Absolutely, it comes out in the timeline, as much so as I think that missed shaping operation of hitting all the radars plays into what eventually happens, which is the overwhelming use of military force, which actually causes that de-escalation because of demonstrating so much power. Absolutely, that call from the United States has more than one person has kind of hinted at it, has mentioned it. Of course, I'll try to find the both sides of that call or that information to include it in the book, but a critical moment in the timeline, and then the overwhelming nature, which is undeniable, of the response to that to make sure they know we can hit you anywhere, don't do it. I mean, it is a very important moment. Absolutely, Shiv.
That's exactly what this last little bit that I want to play out before I get Sushant for a final word is on what India's response would have been in case there was an escalation from Pakistan's side using ballistic missiles. Here's what Air Marshal Nagesh Kapoor says.
We would probably have gone for maybe some assets that could have caused some commercial disruption. Maybe power plants.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Power plants and
Maybe.
infrastructure things.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that would have been the next set of legitimate targets. Targets that were affecting their exact war fighting machinery. Might be.
Yeah.
If we would have just continued on a little longer.
Sushant, this has been hinted at, but for the first time, out in public officially, bridges, power plants, infrastructure was basically what phase 3 would have been of India's response.
Yeah, I think it would have been something like more mixed kind of stuff, maybe a naval port or an airport, something like that. But remember one thing, Shiv, why this particular nugget of information becomes credible is go back to what the Prime Minister said.
Yeah.
I think it's the Prime Minister or the External Affairs Minister who said that when J.D. Vance had called up the Prime Minister had told him very clearly that if the Pakistanis were going to up the ante, India would not back down and India would go up the escalation ladder. So we were very clear what we are going to do. And the escalation dominance was being controlled by India. And clearly this particular nugget which the Air Marshal has given on your podcast, more or less confirmed. Now, what the targets would have been, I'm sure the Air Force and the armed forces have a list of targets prepped and ready. But just a word on that previous thing, about the Air Marshal saying that he lied to his chief. It's not really about lying. I think it tells you what leadership is all about.
Yeah, true.
Leadership of the Air Chief Marshal as well as the level of the, the commanders. He has full faith on his commanders that whatever they're going to do, they're going to do. He's not micromanaging them. A larger strategic direction has been given. He knows what is underway. He doesn't want to be micromanaging at every step and undermining the confidence of his own commanders. That is fabulous leadership, both at the level of the Air Marshal as well as the level of the Air Chief Marshal, and of course the officers who carry out the mission. So I think that's yet an example of what leadership is all about. So all in all, brilliantly conducted operation and fabulously handled at the political level. The only one place where we screwed up big time was information warfare.
I agree with that, and that's the reason why it continues to be such a fascinating topic. And I hope more podcasts, more shows, more interviews, more documentaries will reveal even more layers of this. Air Marshal Kapoor, Sushant Sareen, and John Spencer. Pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time tonight here on India Matters. Thank you so much. Well, if you have been watching, thanks so much. Left, Right and Centre with Vishnu comes up next.